Before I start, I want to mention that English is not my first language, so I apologize if I make mistakes. My mother has always been a kind and loving parent who prioritized us, but she didn't allow us to know her feelings and thoughts. Now that I am an adult, I feel I can understand her better. For context, we are from a poor country in Central America, Nicaragua. When my mother was a child, she grew up in the middle of a war. My grandfather sent her and my aunts to live in the mountains where it was safer, while he stayed in the city to defend their home. By the time the war ended, my mother was already a teenager. My grandfather came back alive, but he had changed. He became a very quiet and distant man. When my mother was 17, she received a scholarship to study in Spain. However, she needed permission from both of her parents to leave the country. My grandfather refused to sign the authorization, so she lost the scholarship and had to stay. Even so, she managed to go to college locally and dreamed of becoming an important economist. When she was 19, she met a man she fell deeply in love with. At 20, she became pregnant and he abandoned her. My grandfather forced her to give the baby to my grandparents so that she could focus on finding a stable job. That baby was my older sister. My mother worked extremely hard until she met my father. She became pregnant again because contraceptives failed, and she had me. 5 years later, she had my younger sister. Despite everything, we grew up in a loving home. We had the kind of childhood many children dream of. We traveled, we know every single city in our country, we played, and we studied. Even though my parents were busy most of the time, they always tried to keep us together as a family. When I was 12, that dream fell apart. My parents started the process of divorce. My sister and I stayed with my mother in the same house my grandfather had protected during the war. At the time, we believed my mother was the bad person in the story because of what people told us. But I noticed that she slowly started to change. She neglected herself, but I never understood why, because she didn't allow us to actually get to know her. Even though she was a loving mother, she never showed us her true feelings. I never saw her sad or mad before the divorce. She was even cold towards people. For 4 years, I heard her crying almost every night. I felt bad for her, but I wasn't supposed to know that she was crying. After the divorce, we rarely saw her. Eventually, she moved to a farm my grandfather had given her, and my sister and I moved to another city so that I could attend college. We only saw her twice a year, if that. My younger sister began to resent her because of the distance, and my older sister had always been resentful because she grew up with my grandparents instead of her mother. When I was 19, protests began in my country and I had to leave. At 20, I became a refugee living alone in a completely different country. My parents supported me financially as much as they could. A few years later, I managed to enter college. Then the government confiscated the farm my mother had. She moved to another country to work and continue paying for our education. She also took my younger sister with her to give her better opportunities. Around that time, I started reconnecting with my mother. Even though we live in different countries and I haven't seen her in 6 years, she tries to call or text me every day. She works 2 full-time jobs and is always exhausted, but she has started sharing more of her feelings with me. I learned things about her life that I had never known before. It turns out my mother never wanted to have children. She dreamed of doing extraordinary things. She wanted to build her own company and become a successful economist. But growing up during a war meant she was only allowed to think about survival. People told her to stop dreaming. When my grandfather refused to let her go to Spain, part of her dream died. Later, when she became pregnant with my older sister, she knew she would probably never leave the country. She also knew almost nothing about contraception. After the war, access to reproductive health care was extremely limited. Today, she regrets leaving my older sister with my grandparents. She knows my sister needed her mother. Later, when she had me and my younger sister, my father began to be unfaithful and mistreated her. She stayed with him because she didn't want us to grow up without a father, like she did. Eventually, he got another woman pregnant. That was when my mother finally asked for a divorce. My father wanted to bring that baby into our home and raise it with my mother. When she refused, he sabotaged her at work until she lost her job. They worked in the same company. That was why she moved to the farm, to earn money. Even though I know she loves us, I also know that this life is not what she imagined for herself in her 50s. Sometimes she tells me about her dreams. She still wants to go to Europe. She still imagines herself in Spain, building a successful company. She also talks about how motherhood consumed her life. She had to prioritize us above everything else. She even accepted being mistreated by her boss just to make sure we always had food on the table. I don't feel hurt when she tells me these things. In fact, I understand her because I share the same dreams. My mother always made sure we had access to information about contraception. She encouraged us to dream bigger than she ever could. She told us that if we didn't want children, she would support us. And if we did want them, she would also support us. She never romanticized pregnancy or motherhood. Instead, she was honest about the sacrifices it requires. Today, I am a 27-year-old child-free woman who is one semester away from graduating from college. My dream now is to find a job that pays well enough to give my mother the Euro trip she always dreamed of. I feel deeply connected to her now because she allowed me to dream. Sometimes I imagine myself in her place, having 2 children at my age. I imagine how scared she must have been. She didn't really have a choice. She grew up with the trauma of war, with little access to education until she was a teenager, and with very limited opportunities in her country. Life dragged her into the path she had, even if it wasn't the life she dreamed of. But despite everything, she gave us something incredibly valuable: the privilege to choose, to dream, and to build the life she never had the chance to live.